Is that okay? Okay. Not in the shot? Okay. So, thank you so much for coming. It's really, really nice. It's a real pleasure to meet you and get to talk to you. Um, just start off and I guess introduce yourself for people that may not recognize you and tell us what your role as provost actually entails.
So I'm Michael Arthur, and I'm President and Provost of UCL. And the role really entails being the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Academic Officer, and the Head of University Administration. So in common parlance, I am the boss.
What's your favorite thing about being provost and president?
Favourite thing? The buzz, the vibrancy of the place, and its unbelievable intellectual environment, and being amongst such an academic environment is just wonderful. Really enjoy it. Really enjoy trying to lead the place to better outcomes.
You've been provost for 2 years now?
Yeah, it's the start of my third year.
Okay, so you came in 2013.
Correct.
Okay. Quick math there. What's sort of your proudest accomplishment since you've been provost in like the first 2 years of your tenure?
Well, I think the three big things that have happened since I've been here, two of which I had a direct hand in, and the third of which less so. The merger with the Institute of Education was obviously a huge piece of work. It's gone very well. Very pleased about that. It brings education in, the discipline of education into an educational establishment. I always thought it was very odd that UCL didn't have that. So now we do, and it also brings a lot of new and complementary quantitative social science research. So that's very, very pleasing, that development. The Olympic Park, and getting to a position where we put together that business case and put together the funding, sought and obtained substantial funding from the UK government to make that happen. That was a piece of work that I was directly involved in, and it's going to be terribly important to the future of UCL because, as you know, we're rather short of high quality space.
Yes.
So acquiring space and new facilities is an important part of delivering on the UCL 2034 strategy. And then the final thing, of course, that's very pleasing was the outcome of the research excellence framework, for which I can claim no credit at all because the submission was put in just a few weeks after I arrived. So David Price and the previous provost, Malcolm Grant, did a great job of pulling together a fantastic team of people and a fantastic submission, and it put us in a very prominent position which has reverberated around the world, beating Oxford and Cambridge on research power. So that's the first time ever that they haven't won that process hands down. So those are three big things.
Back to the second thing for a minute. So you were talking about UCL East, as it's known, correct?
Yeah, that's its current term, yeah.
Okay. So we sort of took to Twitter and Facebook and asked students about questions they'd like us to ask you. And something that came up a few times is actually sort of transparency when it comes to UCL East. People sort of aren't sure what's going to go there, sort of what sort of departments are going to go there, if people are going to split their time between the two campuses. What's going on with that?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me reassure people, we're mainly going to put new activity there rather than redirect anything. Okay. So no one's going to get a phone call, congratulations, you're moving to UCL East. It's not the way we're going to do it at all. Some people want to go there. Some people who've got new ideas and new and interesting developments that they want to develop. So what we've done recently, the reason that you don't know what's going down there is that I don't yet know what's going down there. So we've run a process that has essentially asked the academic community what they would like to do. And about 70 different ideas came forward, and they're being sifted at the moment, considered, looking at the financial side of it as well as the academic side of it, just to work out what would actually work. But it's going to mainly be, I mean, I think I know enough to say that it's going to mainly be in and around the interface between science, technology, engineering, design, and the design being quite broad in its scope, not just purely design, but engineering design, the type of design that the School of Architecture would be interested in. So it's that sort of ethos that's developing, with opportunities to bring the local community in. So there's going to be some technical engineering education as well as degree level, those sorts of ideas. Space for student entrepreneurship. So students who want to become young entrepreneurs need space to do things, and space to work with industry. If one of the big companies, let's say Rolls-Royce, was to come through the door tomorrow with a £20 million offer to get involved in research and education with the company, we would have no space to do it in at all. And that's a weakness for UCL 2034. So it's that sort of idea that will be predominant, I think, at UCL East. But there are other things that are going on already. The access to law type activities, the pro bono work that the students get involved in, we're basically already put an outstation down there so that the local community can gain access to legal advice, which is great. It begins to do something for the community, which is important.
So is that a function of where the campus is going to be in Stratford? Like, was that a conscious choice to put it in a community like that?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, there was obviously the big controversy that went on at UCL before I arrived, which was about whether or not the university moved to the Carpenter's estate. That all fell through. There was a lot of resistance to it because it involved some difficult issues like eviction of current residents. Obviously not a great place for a university to be. That all fell through, mainly for financial reasons in the end, is my understanding. And as that fell through, we were offered the opportunity of going on to the Olympic Park by the Mayor, Boris Johnson, who had a vision, really, which was about an education and cultural hub that would help transform that part of London in the long term. So we were quite excited by that idea. An idea that allows us to create something different, so something that kind of blurs the boundaries between research, education, enterprise, public engagement, multidisciplinary type of campus. So really something that that a university might look like in 50 years' time from now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds interesting. So you mentioned before a little bit about research-based education, what UCL calls the connected curriculum. What exactly is that? I think a lot of people, myself included, I didn't even really understand what it was, or that it sort of existed within the university until recently. So just can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. At the heart of it is a very simple idea, which I think is quite binding, which is to bring the education of our students and our research much closer together. And research-based essentially means getting students involved in research from very early on in their course all the way through undergraduate. It becomes much less novel as you go up the tree. Of course, postgraduate research students are doing this all the time. Master's students have always had a heavy research component, but bringing research back down into the undergraduate curriculum big time, so that our students understand what knowledge is, how it's created, how it therefore shifts with time, learning to deal with the uncertainty that throws up as knowledge shifts with time, getting involved in problem solving through research, getting involved in improving communication skills, getting involved in teamwork, because a lot of research these days, even in the arts and humanities, requires teams of people, and gaining those life skills from first-hand experience all the way through the course, which are going to be essential life skills when you leave here, and they should be and are attractive to employers. So that's really the idea. It motivates the students because you feel like you're right at the heart of things and you're heavily involved, and it's inspirational. And it also motivates the staff because most of us became academics because we believe that those two things belong close together. So connected curriculum is basically the implementation system of making sure that that all happens. So again, at the heart of it is the review of every single curriculum to make sure research-based elements go in and that connections are made between students, academic staff, students and other students, academic staff and different departments. So building all of those connections into that, and somebody came up with a clever title, Connected Curriculum. There are other elements that are crucially important, training our staff to be good teachers in that research-based mode and how that's different to what they've done before. So there's a staff development program that goes alongside it. And then a clever idea, which didn't come from me, was asking the students to become involved in that process. And that's the Change Makers program. So it's student ideas about how they would like to see the curriculum changing in that direction, and their ideas being brought to bear on curricular development. So those three things together are the way that we're actually implementing what the strategy calls for.
What would you say? Well, I guess I would say I think my department, I'm a history student, I think my department does a pretty good job of this. Sort of, obviously, a history degree is all about research, so it's probably easier. But what would you say to students who sort of feel like their degrees don't do a really good job of research-based education? They're not doing a lot of research. I at least know of people who are sort of language students and really hard science, sort of like biology, chemistry people. What would you say to them, and how do you sort of bring those subjects into the fold?
Well, essentially everybody was involved in the consultation, so we have agreed as an organisation that we're going to move in that direction. You're absolutely right, different departments are at different places on this as a starting point. It doesn't surprise me that history is already there. It should be relatively straightforward to make it happen in the hard sciences. I have done this in medicine most of my career. Why is this at the heart of things? It's kind of what I had in my undergraduate curriculum. I really enjoyed that research component. It gave me those skills. I think it gives us a degree of creativity as well. So everyone's moving in that direction. People are moving at different paces, and it won't be an overnight thing. It will take, I think, 5 years to implement effectively. So hopefully in 5 years from now, we won't have students who are not being exposed to that type of pedagogy. But we're in a period of transition, essentially.
So is the university sort of focusing more on certain departments, certain areas that are having a harder time or aren't traditionally research-based, quote unquote?
Yeah, and that piece of work is active. Anthony Smith is leading it, supported by Dilly Fung. So there is a schedule of working through department by department, curriculum by curriculum. Heads of departments and deans obviously have a very active role in all of that. So everyone's kind of shifting in that direction, but we're putting support where it's most needed.
So 2 years ago, when you first talked to PiTV, you said that you hoped your relationship with the Students' Union, UCLU, would be a good one, and that even though you had sort of different political views, that you both were working towards making each student's university experience better. I hope you could work towards that together. What does your relationship with UCLU look like now, and has it sort of gone the way you planned or not?
Well, you have to ask them too, right? But my view is that it has improved, that we've got good leadership in UCLU over the time that I've been here, and I think we've got an understanding and a good working pattern. I think we do share the common desire to improve things for students, and I would like to think that the students would see me as being, for a provost, student-centric. It would be awfully easy to be in this role and be very, very focused on the research excellence of this institution and driving that, and be focused on that and not have enough attention on the students and their experience. That's not me. I've never been like that, and it's one of the reasons I think I got the job is that the council of the university felt that more emphasis needed to be put on students over the next provostship. So Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's difficult stuff, but slowly but surely I think we're moving in the right direction, and I hope you're all pleased that students and their experience features prominently in UCL 2034.
Right.
It's a big issue this year as well. I'm not happy with the National Student Survey results. I'm not happy with the way we looked in the Times Good University Guide. We've got a lot of work to do to make this place more student-centric.
I think that one of the things that I guess the student union and, for lack of a better term, the student left, the most contentious issue for them right now is the problem with rents related to the rent strike. And Anthony Smith recently talked to Pi for a different piece, and he said, and I'm quoting him here, that will not always be straightforward, talking about treating students as partners, and that the rent strike highlights that we are not getting this right. So does this mean that the university thinks they sort of bungled the rent strike, and how do you think the university handled the rent strike? Do you think you could have done better, or what's your view on that?
Well, at the heart of the problem is a couple of simple things. The first is that, in essence, the rents relate to the costs, and therefore, because we're in central London, our rents are relatively expensive compared with the rest of the country. I think most people would understand that simple issue. We do pay the London living wage. That puts prices up. I mean, I think that's a good thing, by the way, and I would never want to change that. So we've got costs that are higher than elsewhere in the country. If we don't cover those costs in the rent, I have to find the money from somewhere else, and in effect you would be cross-subsidising it from the fees that you pay for your education, and I think that that's not appropriate. I think that money that you pay for your fees should go to your education. So it's a balance always between these different issues. Was the rent strike bungled? I don't think so. We've had to stand our ground for the reasons that I've just explained. Could we have done better related to some of the issues surrounding some of the halls close to the demolition sites? I think the answer to that is yes, and I think there's a process ongoing to review that situation and to appropriately support students who were in those halls during that period. So I don't think we've got everything right. I think we've got very old stock that's in need of investment. So we are looking always to improve things with regard to student accommodation.
So talking about the price of the halls in London, are you saying that, so since 2009, the average price of a single room at UCL and halls has gone up 55%. Are you saying the entire 55% is because of the price of living increasing in London?
I haven't gone back that far, and I couldn't give you an honest and an accurate answer to the specific question that you've asked. But in the overall picture, we've got higher costs than most, and we've also got this issue of revamping the stock, all of which needs to be contained within the budget that allows us to operate those halls. So we kind of have it in a ring-fence sense, and so there's a combination of contributing to keeping the stock in good condition and the increased costs.
What would you say to students that say that they're simply being then priced out of going to UCL just because the rent in London is so high? I mean, some of the halls that were in use in 2009 were like the cheapest halls that UCL has, £88 a week or something, and now they've been replaced with some of the most expensive halls, over £200 a week for some of them. Is that sort of changing the demographic of the student population?
Doesn't seem to be. And in fact, I think the evidence is that we've got more students from lower income backgrounds than we've ever had. And as you know, that's an offer target. So whatever else is happening, we are managing to recruit the sort of demographic that we would like to see here. And I would hate the idea that people don't come here because of the price of halls. On the other hand, there's not a great deal I can do about the price of halls given the constraints that I have already explained. So of course we've got financial support systems in place to try and help students that need that help, not least of which is a pretty generous bursary package to students from low-income families. So we try wherever we can to support those that need to come here.
The size of the bursary has been frozen for the past few years, though, correct?
So is the size of the fee.
Yes.
So, again,
but the price of halls has increased.
Because the costs have gone up. Welcome to my world. So no inflationary element in my uplift in my income, but inflationary elements in my costs. And obviously, if we're running it so that we're not cross-subsidising from your student fees to student accommodation, student education fees, I mean, to student accommodation, then inevitably the price of the halls rises.
So after Tim Hunt resigned, you said that equality and diversity are enshrined in our Benthamite origins, which is quite a nice turn of phrase. But do you think we always do the best, the university always does the best of ensuring equality when it comes to, I mean, I'm just thinking of like UCL Qatar, the income disparity, the wage disparities between genders were only sort of rectified once it came out, other things like that. Do you think the university always does a really good job of ensuring equality?
There's only one answer to that question, is there, which is of course not. We strive to get it right, and we've got it prominent in the strategy. It was a big set of issues during my interview for coming here. It's very obvious. I just had to look at the senior team to see that we didn't have gender equality. So we've got a journey to travel on, but we've been brave enough to say that we're not getting it right, and we want to improve and do things better. The evidence is that we are moving in the right direction. We are seeing more women, for example, at grades 9 and 10 than ever before. We're up to, I think it's now 33%. And we've been asked to increase by at least 1% per annum. We've achieved that over the last 3 years. So that's good. It's not fast enough, but of course it relates to vacancies and turnover of posts. So that's an example of getting it right. We're heavily involved in the Athena Swan system, so we're improving things for women. Athena Swan is about women. There's a similar thing now called the Race Charter, the Race Equality Charter Mark. We were one of the pilot universities in that, and we were awarded bronze status in the initial status for that. It was only bronze that was available because it's a new charter mark. They haven't developed the program yet for silver and gold. It will be our intention to go for silver and gold as that develops under the scheme. Not every university that entered, I mean, only half the universities that entered were given bronze status. So I'm proud that we've got somewhere, but we have a long, long, long way to go. Absolutely no question. Let me deal with the Qatar thing. That was actually a system in Qatar paid by the Qatar Foundation, and it was actually a difference between married and unmarried housing allowances. It turned out inadvertently that all the people that were unmarried were women, all the people that were married were men, so we ended up with a gender split in the allowances that were paid. As soon as that was brought to our attention, we dealt with that and went back and renegotiated the package with the Qatar Foundation. I think it took about 6 months to go through that negotiation, but people were reimbursed for what they'd missed out on. So, we've got back to a position of equality in that regard. It was fairly heavily misreported in the press.
So, I think that Provost is a bit of a mysterious figure for a lot of students. But you definitely have made efforts to make sort of your position more transparent with, Provost question time and things like that. Are you sort of still working towards greater transparency on the part of the university? And if so, what are you sort of planning on doing?
Well, I mean, the answer to the question is yes. Of course, transparency and interacting with the student body is important. So there are kind of three techniques really that I'm employing. One is I write something regularly now for My Week, I think it's called, which is a new student communication system from university to students. I don't know how many people read it. I do know how many people open it, and I'm quite pleased with the numbers, so that's good. The question time idea was offered right from the time I came here. I think we had the first one end of year 2. I think we've got 2 or 3 planned for this year, starting, I think, with the clever idea of linking it to the General Assembly. So apart from the fact I'm getting off a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning doing the lunch hour lecture, and we're then going straight to the General Assembly question time, it's going to be kind of an interesting day for me. Not quite sure I'm going to cope with it all, but you know, it's a great idea because there'll be a big audience there, and therefore presumably more questions and more students to listen. So that's good. And the other thing I'm going to do more of this year, as I reconfigure the senior team to get a bit more support, I'm going to free some of my time up to get out and about around the institution. I'm going to be visiting individual departments, and as part of those visits, I will ask to see students, undergraduate, postgraduate talk, postgraduate research, without any staff in the room, so that I can hear directly from the students what's good, what's bad, what they'd like to see change. And that will be part of the feedback loop that I will then report back to the relevant dean and head of department about what they've got to focus on. So I'm hoping that that will be pretty good. You can never do enough of it. You know, it doesn't matter how much you communicate. Someone somewhere will tell you you're not communicating enough. But I think that's quite a reasonable attempt, and we'll see how that goes. See what the response is like. I really enjoyed the last question time. Yeah. It was good fun, and I think it was an honest and frank exchange of views. Yeah. And there were some difficult issues that came up that we tried to deal with as fairly as we could.
I look forward to seeing you around the history department.
Sure.
I just have a few more questions. The first one, something that a lot of people talked about on Facebook and Twitter was sort of 2 parts to this, about sort of university prestige. One is how the university sort of sees the drop in ranking from 4 to 7, right? Yeah, that would be a drop if it was from 7 to 4. Drop from 4 to 7 in world rankings, and then the other one is sort of a more broad question about how to raise sort of national, international recognition of the university. I mean, obviously, it's a university that is so high up in world rankings, but a lot of employers may not know exactly what UCL is, which is kind of odd when you think about it, especially for international students, myself included. I'd like people to know that my institution was a good institution. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. Well, first of all, the rankings, okay? These are the bane of every provost, vice-chancellor's life because they change the methodology all the time. Yeah. So from year to year, they manipulate the weightings and the criteria, usually to create a new story. You know,
so does that mean it doesn't mean anything at all?
I think you have to view them with an air of, you know, cautious, UCL-oriented suspicion and critical and independent thinking. So they give you an indication, but to be quite honest with you, a change of 3 places is meaningless, particularly when I tell you that they deliberately downweighted the value of biomedicine and upweighted the value of arts and humanities. So we're huge in biomedicine, and therefore, inevitably, as soon as they make that methodological change, we're going to change a couple of places. The key thing is there are something like, if you type into Google number of universities in the world, you come up with a ridiculous website that tells you there are 10,672 universities in the world. Okay, so if you're anywhere in the top 100, you're doing a brilliant job. If you're anywhere in the top 20, you're absolutely fantastic. And we're in the top 10 in one World League table. I think we're 17th or 18th in the Shanghai Jiaotong Academic World Ranking of Universities, and I think we're 23rd in the Times Higher. So, you know, pick a number, choose any one, and that's where we are. If you want me to give you my honest opinion, I think we're realistically about 12th or 14th, and that if you look at citations, for example, if you look at the very hard data where there's no opinion involved, then we usually rank about that level. There was a new ranking system came out recently called URAP. It only uses hard data, and it put us, I think, in 12th position. It may have been 14th, I can't quite remember. Now, the second part of your question is really interesting, and is something that I'm quite exercised about, and the council is quite exercised about. So there's a perception that our performance is well ahead of our reputation, and that we're not selling ourselves well enough globally. And we've got two problems. One, I think, is there is brand confusion internationally between UCL and the University of London. So I think the brand that we go with is UCL, London's global university, and we are independent, as you know, of the University of London. We've kept some affiliation with the University of London, so we're an affiliated college. That's for all sorts of reasons. Most importantly, our estate is intertwined. So if we were to break away, there'd be all sorts of estates issues to sort out. So we've kept a foot in the University of London camp, but that's not helping the brand confusion. So we've got to work on that brand confusion. So UCL, London's global university, please stop calling it the college, call it the university in daily language. In the States, there's a different problem, which is people get confused between UCL and UCLA. To which my answer is, it's fairly simple. There's no A on the end. You know, it's University College London, London's global university. So we're working on that. We've got to do better in terms of our press and comms, and we've got to target those that we really want to understand the difference. So if there's confusion amongst the world's best employers about UCL, then let's target the world's best employers for much better communications about UCL. So that targeted approach. I was in the States last week, and this problem did come up. I was watching breakfast television in my hotel room the next morning, and I spotted that lots of people go to the, I think it's ABC, to the square by Fifth Avenue, isn't it? And lots of people were holding up posters. So in my speech to the alumni that night, I said, here's a challenge for you. Why don't a couple of hundred of you turn up around the square with a simple poster saying, it's UCL, not UCLA, London's global university. So we'll see if they rise to that challenge. So that of course, is a gimmick, but it makes the point. It makes the point. It's the job, and it's the job of the alumni, by the way. You know, there's an army of 210,000 alumni out there. They've got to talk about UCL very, very proudly and make sure that their employers know that it's a great university.
I guess sort of my last question before my last question.
This is going to be a hard one.
Maybe. One of the other things that people were talking about on Facebook and Twitter is welfare services, and specifically psychological services. A lot of students are sort of unhappy with long wait times and sort of seemingly underfunded and understaffed psychological services. A lot of people were asking, why not spend the money we're spending on projects like, I don't know, the new pizza place on Mallet Place, on psychological services? What do you say to people like that? Is there any plans to improve psychological services for students?
I'm not aware of the latest data on wait times. I'm aware of the general issue. And yes, there have been requests to consider that. We'll look at it in the planning round. We've got to balance up all of the different investments. To state the blindingly obvious, psychological services is a recurrent cost, and therefore we've got to make sure we budget for it appropriately. Capital things are one-off capital things that you can do and make a difference. So it's a balance between those two things. I'm a medic by background, so I'm very aware of what happens with waiting lists, and I think part of the answer is to make sure that the specialists are doing the specialist work, and things that don't need to go up to that level are dealt with by a triage system before you go there. So I think part of the answer is better support in individual departments for students through a better pastoral care system, and that's obviously part of UCL 2034, as well as just improving the counselling services. But I'm aware of the issue. I think it's an important issue. I would like to feel that the students do get support when they need it, but I would like to think that we can be thoughtful about how to do that carefully across the whole system, not just in psychological services.
Do you think pastoral care has improved since you became provost?
Honest answer, I'm not sure. I haven't measured it, so I can't see a change, and I'm not close enough to it to feel that. You can tell me. What do you think?
I don't know.
It's another of these things. I think when you run a very devolved and autonomous organisation, and UCL is probably one of the most devolved and autonomous universities in the country, it partly explains, by the way, why we're so successful. People come here because they love that. Students come here because they love it, and staff come here because they love it. But it also means that you end up with some patchiness, and you can have one department right next door to another. Students in one department are getting great pastoral care, and the other department isn't there yet. So taking out the patchiness, sharing best practice, trying to improve things generally is kind of right at the heart of what my role is about.
I think my last question is just, do you think that, I guess they're two separate things in some ways. Do you think that the university and students are better off now than they were when you came in as provost 2 years ago?
Yes, I think we've got things moving in the right direction.
Any sort of specifics on that, just generally?
Well, we've reset the tone and the agenda for students through UCL 2034, and we have said that we want to be a great university to be a student at, and to be more student-centric than we've been in the past. And I think that's all aspects of the student experience. So that was in the previous strategy. We're trying to implement it more effectively, and at the heart of it is that relationship between research and education, and rebuilding an integrated university system. I think we've made quite a lot of progress on that. I'm aware of the fact that it won't have translated through yet for an individual student who's been here for the last 2 years, but hopefully by the time we get to year 3, 4, 5, it will be starting to translate through and be quite palpable for students. There's going to be some very physical manifestations of that as well. The new courtyard, the new refectory system, the new student centre, better facilities for students on the off-site campuses, off the main site, I mean. So you will begin to see and feel quite real things soon.
So you definitely think that the physical transformations of the university are going to have a large effect on student satisfaction. I mean, you mentioned earlier yourself the sort of below average student satisfaction scores UCL got this year. Is that going to help that?
I hope they have some effect. The key thing we need to get right is the educational part of the student experience, and that's about making you feel like you're an individual, that you're a valued member of this community, and that you're not just a number. And I don't think we're getting that right at the moment. I'm pushing really hard on that set of issues. I'm giving my senior team a hard time about that every weekly meeting at the moment. So a big push on that set of issues, making students feel that they're key members of this community. It is written in UCL 2034 we now need to implement effectively?
I think that's it. Someone wanted me to ask you who your favorite Spice Girl is. Do you know any of the Spice Girls?
Yeah. Do I know any of the Spice Girls? I can't remember their names. Sugar Spice. How about Sugar Spice? She was great.
Is that one? No, I don't even know.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know a real name.
Okay, well.
They were a bit after my time. The Spice Girls.
That's fair. I guess.
Ask me who my favourite 1970s band are.
Beatle?
No, come on. I'm the Vice Chancellor that brought the Who back to do live at Leeds too. So I grew up with the Who. I love them. They're fantastic. I managed to get them to come to do a concert back at the University of Leeds. So the challenge here, the obvious challenge here is, can we get Coldplay back to play in the quad?
Oh, that would be fantastic.
We're making preliminary inquiries. They are UCL alumni. Yeah, actually. Not directly. You never get to these folks directly. They're protected by layers of people. You've got to find your way through the system. So we're trying to find the right moment and the right way to ask.